Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to be updating you on my Leagues of Votann army project. Now I'm going to refer back quite often to the video I did, the tutorial I did for the Trans-Hyperion Alliance, which is what scheme that I'm picking to do my collection. But for this video I wanted to try out the inverse scheme of that, and it felt like using the Einhyr champion was a great option for that because there's just so much armour on the model. I've done a tiny bit of kit bashing. I really like the idea of her being like a Valkyrie, and when I looked up all the artwork for that and read a bit of the folklore, they always seem to have swords, they seem to ride horses, that type of thing. So I've just given her the female helmeted head from the Hearthguard box, the horse head crest from that box as well, and then I've given her the sword from the Thane box, whatever his name is, Ulthar, whatever it is, that special character model. So nothing too complicated, just a bit of chopping and plastic glue, and jobs are good on. So let's paint. For the base coat, I'm going to cover the whole model in AK reddish grey. Now I could have just done a grey primer, but I'd still have been using this as my base coat, so I've just used my normal black primer for this. I've chosen the reddish grey because it's got quite a warm tone to it, which I really like, and I only used Rakarth flesh to do the secondary colour on the Hearthkin models, so there wasn't really any depth to it whatsoever, so I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to use for the shadow colour for it, so I had all the umpteen grey paints out, and I just thought this one was a nice option to use. It was darker, but it also changed a little bit, and I think it will be quite interesting. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the AK paints on the whole through the airbrush, so I've over thinned it a little here, which is why it's taken me so many coats to get a nice solid base coat. That's not intentional, so I've noted down in my little book not to thin it as much. That's why it's always really useful to have that notebook when you're doing army projects, so when you come back it's not just, oh, you use this paint, you can actually, what was the dilution, what was the pressure I was spraying it at, and any little notes, did I need to add in a bit of flow improver or whatever, so you can just pick up where you left off and get that nice consistency across your army. As usual, I'm spraying about 25 to 30 psi using 0.4mm needle and nozzle. For this project I'm using my Harder and Steenbeck Evolution Occult Paint one, just because I still haven't cleaned my Infinity out, so I'm still using the Evo. And then for the highlight I'm just using Games Workshop Rakarth Flesh. Now I've thinned this with a Life Colour thinner, it's the same I used to thin the AK with, but you could use Vallejo, Medea, whatever you want really, doesn't matter. It'll all do a good job. And I'm doing a very simple highlight, more or less a zenithal highlight, so lighter as if the light source was coming from above, it's lighter towards that light source and darker if a surface is facing away from it. But I'm making sure that focal points like her shoulder pads, the helmet, the left leg where it's raised up and coming towards that light is a bit brighter. But as you can see, the model itself has a huge amount of presence, or it will have in the army, just because of the sheer size of the damn thing. It's really, really cool. But just like with Hearthkin, I want the oils really to do the work on this project, not the airbrushing. For the oils, I'm going to use white, titanium white here, but white. I'm going to use smoke, which is sort of a grey colour. I'm going to use dust, which is quite similar to the Rakarth flesh, and then I'm going to use this neutral grey, which is actually really blue. So again, ignore whatever they say on the tubes, it's the colours that is more what you're always looking for. Now you've seen me use oil paint rendering as a technique, or dot filtering as a technique, on a lot of my personal stuff. I am using it here, but I'm using it in nowhere near as deliberately as I will have used it on, say, the Titans or other armor projects, where I'm really focusing where I'm putting the different colors. I'm always drawing them down in the same direction with my brush. This is much more about just getting them on there, smooshing it around, and just creating this interesting, gnarly looking surface on the armor, this lived in, pitted kind of a vibe to it. It's a lovely way to paint. It's very relaxing. For me, this style of painting that I'm doing on this army, this army project's just for me. It's just to enjoy, have on the shelf, maybe play some games with, I don't know, but not going to worry about that. But it's just to enjoy the processes. And for me, one of the big processes that I enjoy is layering tons of different colours and techniques and things on top of each other to create the final finish of the model. And I don't mean the gloss or the matte finish, I mean the look of the model. And oils and enamels and things like that are part of that. And what I enjoy most about it is generally the individual steps are really nice and simple. It's not too much thinking about it when I'm doing it. I'm not having to be super accurate. But there's always a little bit of care with each step. But add them all together, and by the end of it, I'm really happy with the outcome. So I don't have to be excellent at any one step of this process. I just need to think about it a little bit, enjoy it, and go. So once all the oil's on there, I've just wetted down a brush with some mineral spirits, taken the excess off so that the brush is barely wet anymore, and then just smooshed it around on there. So I'll do it one more time on the shoulder pad for you to see. But again, the Hearthkin video I've done, I'll link up in the top here, and I'll put down in the description as well. Can't remember if I said that already, but I've had to do this audio a few times because of illness and then the microphone stopping working, so can't quite remember which intro I'm on at the moment. But yeah, just smooshing it around, and you can already see the variety it's giving to these armour panels. Now for the orange stripe, I'm just base coating it using the Pro Acryl orange, which was the main orange that I used when the orange was the main scheme. And I've mixed in a little drop of the Chimera orange just to improve the coverage of it. Just like when I did it on the Hearthkin models, I'm going to use oils to create the predominant colour. This is just giving me a bit of an acrylic base to work from. And you see I drew the one side in and then did these little squiggly lines to fill it in. And that was just to try and make sure that because I am using lots and layers of different things, I don't want to build up too much sort of brushstroke texture on the model, as in physical ridges and things like that on the model. Now, I've way gone overboard on the amount of oil I've splodged on at this point. It was ridiculous. I don't know what I was thinking. That's enough oil to do an entire miniature I've put on that stripe. So when it came to smooshing it, it was great. The colour looked fab, but it looked like I put toothpaste or something across the model, poster paint. It was that thick. So all I did was, in the end, after it obviously hadn't dried for ages, I took a Q-tip and I just pressed that gently against the stripe, and I just rolled it up, and it just soaked up a load of that oil and thinner and helped it dry off quicker. But I think I'm going to paint a model using almost entirely oils soon. I just really enjoy using them. And it might be quite fun. So if you fancy seeing that, let me know in the comments, and I will endeavour to actually film it as a little series. So once all that was dry, I gloss varnished the model and did the decals. And once the decals were set, just like with the main scheme, the orange scheme, I've given the whole model a wash using Industrial Earth oil paint. So just all over, pin wash. It's not a thick wash at all, you can see it on the cardboard there, but it's just enough to sort of tint all of the armour and just start to bring in a little bit of definition and contrast. But that's not its job. Its job here is mainly to filter the armour and just to give it a sort of grungy, grimy coating all over. Now I'm just using normal mineral spirits here to thin it, not my usual Sansador, and that's because I was filming and I needed it to dry nice and quickly. So I've used quick drying oils and I've used quick drying mineral spirits. So after about 10 minutes, I got the hairdryer on it, and then within 15 minutes, I'm good, ready to paint straight away. Now, one of the focal points on a lot of the Votan miniatures seems to be this plasma blade thing. And I've seen a bunch of people do it, and it's fun, right? It is fun, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea. And also the way I've seen people do it seems awfully involved. For what you're trying to do is create this sort of living lava-like effect on the model. So it's random, right? So for me, if I've ever got to try and create tons and tons of random marks on the model, I'm almost certainly going to sponge. So that's what we're doing here. I've base coated the sword with a white, and then I've taken 3 contrast paints, the yellow, the orange and the red. I've mixed them as well, so I've got 5 different colours there. And then I'm going in with my sponge, popping it in the liquid, touching it off on a piece of kitchen paper to take the excess off, and then I'm just going in and sponging progressively less area each time. So I'm trying to leave the core of the blade running down that central channel, that nice bright yellow colour. Then I work towards the tip of the blade, but also out towards the edges of the blade as the lava itself is cooling. Then I go in and get the orange mix on its own and do that. I would recommend maybe you use some reverse grip tweezers to hold your sponge rather than doing it with your fingers like I'm doing here. Partly because obviously you can't see bugger all when I'm filming it, but also I did get a few splodges where I didn't want them. Now thankfully, because the model still had that tiny sort of layer of gloss on it, it was very easy to wipe it off with a Q-tip. Just wet it with a little bit of water and then just wipe that excess paint off. But you can see, I hope, already this random pattern that we're getting created on the blade. I think we're now working towards the pure red. I think it's hugely effective and it's taking no time at all. And as I say, normally this kind of effect isn't my cup of tea necessarily. And I think it still looks maybe a little odd against the rest of the model because of the style in which I've painted the rest of the model. But I don't hate it. And it might be something I use again in the future, particularly I think on a fantasy model. I think I might be happier with it. But actually, you know, it's pretty cool. So as I say, yeah, the main premise is stick nice, light, bright in the middle where the energy's coming from, and then as you work away from it, you get darker. So you could do this with any colour you wanted. The reason I've chosen to go with the reddy orange colour is because I wanted to create that little triangle of orange. So I had the orange on the shoulder pad, the orange on the knee pad, and the orange on the sword. That will give me that nice little triangle of those colours. And then all I've started to do is mix a little bit of black. This is Vallejo flat black. Vallejo model colour black, which is very flat. And then just working this right towards the edges. And then all I do, which I don't film, is take a brush and just brush the edges with the black. So it's sort of really, really solid. Now, because contrast paint's got this sort of slightly strange, almost glossy finish, as you're doing this, it can look a little messy, and particularly because the middle of the sword isn't defined either. But once we go in and black out those other details, and then especially when we've hit the model with our matte varnish a little bit later, it will just clean all of that up. It'll be a nice uniform finish. And as I say, really, really pleased with the effect. For the time it's taken, all of certainly less than 5 minutes, I really like it. And there you can see, just by blacking out the details around it, the effect is sold much more. So yeah, I'm okay with it. Now for the chipping. Again, if you guys have seen any videos I've done before, you know this is something that I really enjoy doing. I said before I'd use a sponge to create random effects. I would, but I wanted to be really precise with this, and I want to be putting chips along nearly every single edge on this miniature, which, as you can see, there are a lot of edges on the armour panels. I find it a lot more accurate to use a paintbrush to do this with. So I'm just using Rakarth Flesh here, even though we used Rakarth Flesh through our airbrush for the highlight, because we filtered it over with that oil wash. This is going to be much lighter now when we apply it over it anyway. I've thinned it, ever so slightly on my wet palette, but I'm really just using the moisture of my wet palette to thin it down. And then it's a case of making sure my brush has got a nice point on it, and then just relaxing and tapping around all the edges, just lots of little taps and scratches. And it's kind of how I like to edge highlight, basically. And then I go over that with a chipping colour. So in this case, I've chosen Vallejo Panzerace's Dark Rust, but you could use a dark grey or a dark brown, will work nicely for this. And here I'm following those chips that I've done previously with the Rakarth Flesh, and maybe I'm covering up, I don't know, about 80% of them with the brown. And this is just to represent where the armour has started to corrode. And I want my Votan, my leagues, to be really, really beat up. I think I say that in the orange video. It's the models themselves. I think when I first saw them, I wasn't necessarily all in. but reading the background, I loved it. And then getting them in hand and realising I could paint them in the sort of grim, grungy style that I enjoy, and realising how well I think they would work as canvases for that, I ended up getting very excited. So hopefully, I can bring you guys a bunch of these videos over the next few months as I build the army out. I suspect the interest will wane for it on YouTube and things like that, but I would really enjoy to share that with you guys if you fancy seeing it. Now for the skin, there's not much, but I just wanted a nice sort of ruddy dwarf flesh colour. So I've base coated it using Games Workshop Night Questor Flesh. Then I've taken Shadow's Flesh by Vallejo. I've thinned that right down to basically a wash consistency and washed that all over. I will link up here to how I did a Caucasian skin tone video. It's a fairly old video, but I actually think it's really good content-wise. And it's just about using sort of 3 paints to get your skin done, not overcomplicating things, and you can get a really nice effect. So here I'm going back in with the Shadow's Flesh and being a little bit more deliberate where I'm applying it, but obviously it's very hard to see this tiny face on this video, so that's hence why I link it up in the top now. But I chose to have the open visor on there because I just thought it needed a little extra. And again, I really like the idea of her being this Valkyrie, so I needed to show that it was a female model. And then to highlight, I've mixed Rakarth Flesh into the Night Questor. So again, if I've ever needed to highlight any colour on this model, previously or going forwards, I'm just using Rakarth Flesh mixed in to lighten it up. But it's a lovely little sculpt, really is. It's probably one of my least favourite of the models when we first saw them, but actually it's been a real joy to paint. I think that's one of the things that's keeping me going. Is I just love the models too much. The little horsehair plume thing, I've just used Baraknar Burgundy by Games Workshop and added in Rakarth Flesh to highlight it. Nothing complicated. Now, one thing I did change, I wasn't overly happy with the silvers that I'd done on the Hearthkin, so I changed it up and used a dark silver metallic by Pro Acryl. I think I'm a little happier with this as a base colour. So yeah, it's while I'm testing out on some of these characters and stuff, these are still, they're still test models essentially, even though I will be using them. The ones I don't care or I care the least about are where I'll do a bit of testing. And then for the gold, I've used Necro Gold by Scale 75. I really wanted this sort of really old gold look. I love the fact that they're these super high-tech army, yet they've got a lot of that Norse mythology, classic sort of dwarf vibe to them. So I wanted to put some of those precious metals on the model, but not too much. I wanted them to stay high tech. So I've done the runes and I've done the little crest in that. Now I'm going to wash the whole model just like I did with the orange one. This is a mix of brown and black oil. This is Shadow Brown and Black by Absalom 502, 50-50, and then thinned down with some mineral spirits. And I'm just showing you this, even though it's in the other video, just to show you the consistency of the wash that I'm going for, because a few people have asked, and I often get often get messages from people that struggle a little bit with oil washes. They often get them separating out, or they're too muddy. So this is kind of thing I'm looking for. I would say this is my sort of baseline that I would work a wash from. So I can see through it on the metal dish, but it's not separating out. And now just liberally applying that all over the model. I try and end my brush strokes in the recesses, but I'm making sure everything gets a coat of this. And again, this is going to help filter it and add yet another layer of colour and interest to the armour. But its real job is to bring that definition now, that contrast and definition, and separate out all of those panels. It also does a brilliant job on the metallics. So I say I know a lot of the steps I'm going over are ones I have gone over on that orange video. The main differences for this are obviously the sword itself and then the alternate colour. But I think it is worth reinforcing stuff. And again, that's dried, so it's had, I don't know, 10 minutes hairdryer on it. You can see the difference is night and day. Now, I just wanted to age the gold up a little more, so I'm using a green enamel paint here. It wasn't quite dark enough, so in the end I actually mixed it with the brown oil wash before. You're absolutely fine to mix enamels and oils to create the colour you want. And this is just going to give the metals a little bit more to them. You'll notice there's a couple of tiny details I've used Rune Lord brass on, so the little decoration on the hilt of the sword and the little energy things in the top of the crest. To give them a bit of something, I used copper oxide oil as well to do a bit of verdigris on them, which I think you'll see in a minute anyway. But as with a lot of my models, I quite like a limited palette. Or certainly I like there to be a real dominant colour across the model, and then I love using the metals as a way to bring in very small amounts of additional colour. And as I've said before, I love metallics on GW models. It just feels very Warhammer to me. And again, it's why I just think the leagues are such a cool army. You know, they are high tech, but to me they still feel very in keeping with the setting, and I think are very easy to make look grim. I'll say grimdark because I think this model does look grimdark, even though it's not necessarily done in the grimdark TM style. For me, it's still got that gritty sort of nastiness to it, but it's by no means realistic, you know, or anything like that. Here we are with a little bit of copper oxide on there as well. I actually originally did those little I don't know what they are, little studs around the energy pack in the copper as well. It was too much. The model started to look a bit too busy at that point, so I just went back to silver with them. And now last thing is to do a little bit of streaking. I'm using winter streaking grime here, so basically a dark brown-green enamel wash. I'm just finding a few rivets, a few little patches on the model to do some splodges of that, then clean my brush off and pull the streaks down. I really fancy doing something very heavily weathered soon, so if you've got anything in mind you'd like to see, let me know. I just really fancy doing a video on it, because I think there's a few bits that people maybe... I think there's a few little tips and tricks I think could make it a lot more enjoyable for people. Because it's a very fun thing to do. And I probably spent about 5 minutes working around the rest of the model like this as well, just adding these little final touches. Been trying to take a little bit more time with these models. Just enjoy doing them. And there she is done. So all I've done there is the same basing as I've done on the Hearthkin. And then once everything was dry, I did go back in, and for the gold, I used Peridot Alchemy by Scale 75, just to do a couple of highlights. I re-highlighted the silver just using the dark silver metallic, and I re-highlighted the brassy colour using Rune Lord brass, but nothing other than that. And I'm over the moon with how she's come out. Very sadly, when I'd finished filming this, I broke the sword, which I'm a bit gutted about. So, if I didn't love the project, that would probably be me throwing my toys out the pram and done with it. But I'm looking at it right now, and I will glue that back together this evening, hopefully. So also, thanks for bearing with me on this one. It's okay, you guys should have had this time last week, but unfortunately I've been rather unwell. But we'll be back to normal scheduling, and I will fit in your extra Votan video at some point this month as well, so you might get a midweek drop for it. But yeah, as you can see, this is how I've taken. I've tried out the alternate scheme for the army. It's a character model, but it's not really much different from the normal Hearthguard. So I've got a good idea of what I can do with them models, those models as well. So I'm going to tweak my metals and do them more like I've done on her rather than on the Hearthkin tester. Thankfully, that's why I like doing a few testers, particularly for an army. I don't think one's enough. I think it's worth trying it out across a few different models. But yeah, just getting ready really to pull the trigger. I've got in my mind what I'd like the little force to look like. So I want some more Hearthguard to join her. Put them in one of the nice big land fortresses, and then I want to do a couple of the little Sagittar buggies to have some of the normal Hearthkin pioneers in, and I think that's where I'll probably leave it for sort of phase 1 of the project, and then next year I'd like to dive back in again. But let me know, if you guys are really enjoying watching it, then I do find that quite motivating because it's just fun to share, isn't it? So I will go back and paint some more, and I don't know, I think it's a tough one. I'm unconvinced about the bases. I think I get a bit lazy with my bases, if I'm absolutely honest. And I think a lot of that's come from doing so many of these YouTube tutorials where it's just a nice simple base and be done with it. I think maybe I need to make them a touch more exciting. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that. I'm not a huge fan of the overly elaborate sculpted bases, but I think perhaps I need to do something in between the two. So that could be a fun little project to document as well. So as ever, thank you so much for your support that you give us both here, particularly on here obviously, and on YouTube. We've no intentions of stopping. We've got so many fun projects coming for you guys over the next couple of months. Few people have asked, with everything that's going on, we've no intentions of putting prices up or anything like that. It will stay at what it is. And you guys just can continue to enjoy it for what it is, and to use it. If you've got questions, hit up in the comments, let us know. We'll always do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. And if you're on Discord, jump on there. I'm going to be doing a project on Discord in the new year with Ben, and try and engage a little bit more in that. It's not a platform I'm that comfortable with, so go easy on me and help me learn and figure it out. But yeah, thanks ever so much for watching. I'll see you next time.